Welcome back to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, Managing Director and founder of The Sales Doctor. Today I'm joined by Michael May. And Michael May is the General Manager of Supply Chain Operations at Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op. For 8 years, he's been with the co-op as an employee, but he's actually had a lifelong association with the co-op because he grew up in a fishing family, living half the year at Abrolhos Islands, which is actually behind him for those of us who are watching on YouTube. Look, he's well-credentialed. He holds a Master's in Business Administration with a specialisation in business leadership. But the most interesting thing about his bio, besides the fact that he's married to a fashion icon, which I've just been talking with him about, and the fact that he's, father of 4, which is amazing, he actually is an amateur banjo player and interested in all things UFO. So we haven't got time to cover all of that in this conversation, but we might save that for another time. What do you think, Michael?
Fantastic. We'll start with the UFOs and work backwards. Hey, I think let's do that.
I like it. It's very interesting. So what we might start with is a little bit about the Geraldton Fishermen's Cooperative, because it's pretty unique in its structure and operation. And until I'd met you, I was totally unaware that that was quite common actually in the cray fishing industry, particularly in WA. So I'm wondering if you can just start us off by walking us through the origin story and the way that it went to market in the beginning, right through to its current structure and what the market reach looks like now.
Sure thing. So really timely because we actually just did a whole history sort of revamp and purpose revamp recently with our leadership summit. And day 2, we actually looked at the origins of the co-op from the very early days when, fishing was seen as kind of the lowest of the low in terms of industries and jobs you could have, and the way it used to work here in WA, the lobster fishermen, they would rock up and they would have their boat and anyone could go fishing, anyone could just, get a boat, get some pots and out they go. But they were sort of, loosely organised group, but they were all supplied their lobster to a small group of processors who them just as, any other supplier. They tried to screw them down, get the lowest price for the, for their inputs as they could for their business, which meant the fishers weren't getting a great price. And we heard some really interesting stories from some of our fishers when we did our sort of history review that, there used to be one of our directors, his grandfather used to have to go to the Abrolhos Islands, which is about a 4-hour boat ride out of town, catch the crayfish or the lobster, bring them back in, and then actually get on the train and ride with his product down to Perth to make sure that he got a fair price for his lobster at the other end. Otherwise, he'd send them down there on his own and they would say, sorry, the crays are no good today, we're not going to pay you for them. So the fishermen, we're basically being taken advantage of. And the thing with cooperatives, if you look across, the history of cooperatives, they generally form when there's some kind of market failure that needs to be corrected. And so the fishermen, were a group that had a shared economic purpose. They wanted, get good value from their lobster. And there was a market failure. So they got together and they said, hey, we think we can get more value for our hard work if we process and export the lobster ourselves. So they did. They came together and they formed the Geraldton Fishermen's Cooperative in 1950. And they started exporting, catching, processing and exporting their own lobster. And to sort of summarise the growth, back then, before they formed the co-op, they were getting the equivalent of about $5 a kilo for their lobster. And the Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op made up a very small portion of the market, probably less than 10%. Today, even with all the difficulties we've had with COVID and with the China market, Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op, 1 in every 2 lobsters that leaves Australia in total comes from Geraldton Fishermen's Cooperative, and we get an average return of about anywhere from $50 to $70 per kilo for the lobster. And we're still a cooperative, so 75 years, still a cooperative, still going strong. And, we've got grandsons of the original founders that are still fishing for us today. So it's an incredible story. It's a really incredible story.
It sure is. I mean, there's so many reasons why as soon as I met you and as soon as I, met Belinda as well, and we started to get to know each other, and you were telling me about the journey that the GFC had gone on,
Mm.
I was immediately attracted to it because I just knew that it was resonant with, my methodology around, the sales revolution, predominantly because of the difference it had in the way that it went to market. It has multiple customers, if you
Mm.
like, and also the success that comes with 75 years of doing business in a certain way means that there's clues there that I really wanted to extract from this conversation today that I think other people can learn from. And the other factor that we'll get into here is really about the community aspect, but I'll get
Mm.
to that later because that's a big part of its success as well. So when we came together more recently in that, for my keynote, when you were getting together to do your conference, that keynote was really centered around a culture of customer, which in my methodology is that intersection between customer consciousness and commercial competence. So when I talk about, for the listeners who don't know yet about my methodology, customer consciousness is the premise that everybody is a customer and has a customer, even if they don't know that they do. And commercial competence is the fact that everyone's delivering value to those that they serve, whether or not that's positive value or negative value. And people are walking around with that equation in their heads. So coming right back to the GFC, when it comes to delivering value, and remember that exercise that we went through, what were you noticing were some of the realizations from people outside of sales first?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a really good question, and I do have to give you a bit of a plug there because that session was just fantastic, and it aligned so well with the purpose of our organisation. Which, if you look at the purpose we were founded, it was to create value for our members, for our fishers, and we've taken that value and or that purpose, sorry, and we apply that as the lens which we view every decision that we make. Is it creating value for our members? So when we started talking about that, you talk about customers. Well, for us in the co-op, the fishers or the members are our number one customer. And I think what some of the feedback we got from our teams, almost without fail, was that they had not forgotten the impact that they have on the customers, but it's really easy to get caught up in the day to day and not realize how much they can influence the value we deliver back to our members. And then when you started expanding it out further to say, well, it's not just the members that are customers, but my guys in the supply chain, it's a very mechanical thing. There's trucks, there's depots, there's people moving baskets, but every link in that chain is the customer and sort of supplier relationship. And so we've had some really good conversations after that session around, well, how can we start, enhancing the value we're delivering to each other as customers and suppliers. It's been really, it's just been great to hear the conversations that are happening now. And the terms, like, the term customer is getting used on a daily basis now, whereas before it was only the sales guys talking about it. And it's just been fantastic to see.
Look, I loved watching the pennies dropping around the
Mm.
room, and I'm so grateful that you've shared that the word customer is being used because it's different, in my opinion, it's different to stakeholder. Because when we
Yep.
talk about stakeholders, it's kind of out there, it's unmeasurable, it's so impersonal. But when we use the word customer, there's a one-to-one relationship where someone's being of service to another person. So I'm absolutely delighted to hear that. What about though, because for me, I was really interested in the responses from the sales team, because there were light bulbs going off for them too.
Yeah.
What are some of what's some of the realizations that you've noticed now from them?
Oh, look, I think the main one is that we always kind of saw, I mean, we've had fantastic relationships with our customers in China for many years, and what was really interesting for us when COVID hit and when we had the difficulties, which I won't get into with the China trade, it forced us to cast our net a lot wider. And so we weren't just relying on established relationships that we'd had for 20 or 30 years with customers that knew our brand, knew our product, knew the way we operated. We were having to go out for the first time and really build, first time in a long time, build new markets, build new customer relationships, build that trust in our brand, build that sort of brand equity, if I can use that term, with people that had traditionally not had a relationship with us. And so I think for our sales team, and listening to our Brian, our GM of Trade and BD, it's got him really focused and really keen on, how we can lean into that, customer relationship a bit more and start delivering value in different ways. And we're already looking at, we've had a meeting with a couple of guys this week who are looking at developing a lobster sauce, lobster sriracha sauce. And straight away now we're talking about, okay, well, how can we line that up with, we might not sell that product, but how can we line them up with some of the people we're supplying lobster to as a value add? And so there's all these kind of, this excitement around these new customers we can bring on board and how we can engage them and how we can really, activate that relationship. So I think that for them was that light bulb moment. We're not just, getting lobster and sending it to people that have always bought it. We've got a great product, and I have to give the product a plug. It's the best lobster in the world, and we want to get it out there. And so we need to get these customers as excited about it as what we are.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why, we even started talking was because you recognised from that initial workshop that we did when Vistage was still called Tech in WA earlier in the year. We recognised together, then the conversation was about sales and operations having a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
In that, one can't really be successful long term and sometimes even short term without the other one. So I think you really get this. You get this more than I think a lot of people. You kind of viscerally understood this. So I'm interested in why you think, Michael, it helps for all functions across the value chain to understand who their customers are, in inverted commas, and what value they deliver to each of those customers and how that can change company performance.
Yeah, look, it's probably, to answer that, I probably need to give you a bit of context around how our business operates, if that's okay. So we, as a cooperative, we don't control the activity of our fishers on a day-to-day basis. Our contract with our fishers is basically, you can fish any day of the year that you'd like, and you can deliver product to us, and we will receive it, and we will care for it, and we'll process it, and we'll market it. The only mechanism we have to control their activity is beach price, which is the price per kilo we pay when they deliver lobster to us, and that can change sort of, day to day, week to week. And so what that means for us then as a business is that we don't have a month forecast of what our intake is going to be on any one day. It fluctuates based on weather and customer demand and price and time of the year and whether the fishers decide they want to go on holiday for a month or, there's so many. If the footy's on, sometimes it'll drop off. So what that means for our teams internally then is that we operate on almost a day-to-day basis in terms of planning our intake, planning our transportation of goods up and down the coast. So we go from Geraldton. Well, we actually go from Denham in Western Australia all the way down to Augusta. So there's about 1,000 kilometres of coastline that we're moving lobster up and down every day. And then on the customer side, we're also, particularly for our live product, we're actually, selling 1 or 2 days ahead. So between, getting the lobsters and selling the lobsters, we're dealing in a 48-hour time period. And so you can only imagine how difficult that makes it when you're organising, staff to receive the lobster and grade it and pack it into tanks, trucks to move the lobster up and down, and then staff at the other end to process the lobster, pack the lobster, and get it onto the airlines in time because we do everything by air freight. So the importance of understanding that customer-supplier relationship for us is everybody from the chain, from the person, from the fisher who's delivering the lobster, right through to the freight forwarder who's getting the product on the airlines for us, understanding that, the quality of information you're delivering to the person the next in the chain, the timeliness of the information, even just the grace that you're giving them sometimes in understanding that it's not always going to be perfect, but you're going to do your best to give what they need. The only way that we operate as a consistently high quality, well-oiled machine is for every single person to trust that the next person in the line has actually, is working with them towards the same goal. And it doesn't always work. I mean, we get frustrations where, you'll hear the operations guy saying, oh, the bloody marketing team have changed the plan again, and we're packing out at 12 instead of 1, and I've got to call all these staff. And so there is genuine frustrations there. But again, it's all about that trust, right? It's that, they're not doing that to make your life difficult. They're doing that to sell the product to return value back to the fishers, which means, we need to feed into that, and we need to help them out on that journey. So for us, that customer supplier relationship internally is as important, if not more important, than our external relationships. So I hope that's kind of explained or answered that question. That's for us. That's key.
No, that is key. And I think just taking the time out, like we did at the conference, just to really remind ourselves of our role along that chain too, and understanding the measurable. I know we didn't quite get there in the conference, but understanding when we can get to that, the measurable value that we actually deliver.
Yep.
What that means is on those days where we're under pressure and we're starting to get frustrated because things aren't going the way that we'd like them to, or the way that we think they should, or whatever, because it's life.
Yep.
And you are under these time constraints simply because of the nature of the live product that you're exporting. There is pressure that's genuine, and you've never missed, a delivery or damaged a delivery in something like 30 years. Am I right with that?
Yep, correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which just is astounding. That said, there can be, some sentiment that people forget, and they can say about marketing, they can say about sales, and they're doing their job, but it does create pressure, which is very, very real. But the thing that I heard you just say and describe brings me back to the reason that you had that conference in the first place, which was about wedding the team back to their purpose.
Yep.
And when we talk about purpose, we talk sometimes about this nebulous purpose that the company has, and some people are connected to it, other people it's an abstract concept. If you're a truck driver, what's my purpose? I'm driving a truck.
Yep.
Mate, my purpose is to do a good job and get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm managing a depot, it's to make sure everything goes smoothly and, nothing goes wrong to the best of my ability. If I'm managing logistics, it's all of that stuff. But when we actually put a measure against this stuff, and when we understand, like you said, every single link in that chain and what that measurable value delivered actually is, with regard to the end customer that we're talking with, so all of those customers and the end customer, it crystallises our focus and brings us back to a very concrete purpose, which I think is sometimes very helpful.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you've nailed it, and as you saw at that conference when we started talking about the measurable value, and you challenged us to say take an action, and how you're going to increase that value. For us, the guiding light has always been that create value for our members. And yes. I think you're right. People have along the way that purpose. In the early days, it was really easy to stay focused on that because, like I said, growing up in the industry, the members were part of the community. And so it was family members working in the factory. It was family members working in the trucks. It was, the fishers were part of that greater community. So anyone who was part, you speak to anyone in Geraldton over the age of 40, and they've all either worked for the Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op, either on a boat or in the factory, or they know someone who has. And I think the challenge that we faced and why it was so important to bring us back to that purpose is, as businesses grow and as they evolve, and 75 years is a long time to be in business. We've expanded now from Geraldton. We're now down in Perth, and we've got a satellite business in China, and we've got people that are coming into the business for the first time that don't have that almost that sentimental connection to that purpose. Because you talk about the emotional value as well that you can create, right? And I think the other thing there with our purpose and what we had to really refocus our teams on, value's not just money. We're not just creating, we're not just making the fishermen a buck. I mean, they do quite well, out of the product, but it's not just about money. It's about that sense of community. It's about jobs. It's about the lifestyle of, being close to the ocean. And there's so much value that gets created in that. And for me, the big takeaway was when you gave us the three types of value that you can create. And that's when I think people started going, oh, yeah, okay, I might not create $1 for the fisherman, but I create value in a different way. And that, I think, helped us crystallize around that purpose because, we've got value embedded in our purpose statement, and people were able to start personalizing their contribution to that in those three different ways that you outlined for us. And that, I think, was really helpful.
That was the bit that really struck me with sales. So there was one person in particular, and his name escapes me, but he turned around and he said, so value doesn't have to be about money. And I was like, no, but it's always measurable, so even the emotional value is still measurable. So no, that's great. I mean, the merging of customer and company and community and company, I talk about again because it happens with mutual mattering and mutual enrichment, which again is fundamental to what I'm talking about. And it happens when both parties matter equally to each other. And you talked about there so beautifully the early days of the GFC where it was personal. It actually was personal because, everyone was working in it. And if you weren't working in it, you were supporting it. And it went back into the community. Community came in, it was all of that. And it's when, both of those parties, whoever they are, see themselves invested in the other's success.
Yep.
I saw that day. I left on a high. I loved every minute that I was there. So when we look at the three elements in the GFC of company, fishers and community, each of those contributes to the other's success, and each of those people or parties is invested in each other's mutual benefit. Let's talk about the community for a minute because it's a huge historical and current contributor to that mutual mattering. Can you tell us how integral the community actually is to GFC and vice versa, whether that be socially, economically, and also just on a practical level?
Yes, sorry, I missed a little part of the question now. I think my internet lagged, but that is how valuable that relationship is. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, to both. Yeah, to GFC and to the community.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, the reality is that because we are a cooperative. So we actually are governed by sort of 7 cooperative principles, which is laid out by the International Cooperatives Organisation, and one of them is concern for community, because I think something that cooperatives do really well is they think about, I don't want to use that term stakeholders again, but it forces you to think about the stakeholders a lot more broadly than a traditional corporate model. And in some ways, cooperatives, and the BCCM has got some really good information on this. That's the Business Council of Co-ops and Mutuals. They talk about cooperatives being the sort of the original. You've got all these organisations popping up now, and it's all about social enterprises and promoting the social. Well, cooperatives are basically the original model of that, and they've been around for hundreds of years. Because it's all about, again, it's those people with a shared economic purpose coming together to solve a problem that no one else has been able to solve. And when you start, looking at the way that cooperatives do that, it's by drawing on the strengths in the community, and it's by supporting the community and saying to them, hey, we can be strong in this, but, it's in that word, cooperative, cooperation. We need you, you need us. And so, if I could talk about the value that Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op brings to the community, first of all, we're the only lobster processor in Western Australia that employs employees all the way from, as I said, Shark Bay all the way down to Augusta. So we've got, just off the top of my head, there's Kalbarri, a small town just north of Geraldton, population probably, 10, 15,000 people. We employ people there. We have fishers there. We have property there. We directly contribute to that community and vice versa. We have Geraldton, which you visited, population of around 30,000. We employ around 100 people here. We buy locally. Everything we buy is bought locally. We don't import a good deal of our business inputs. Ice, we buy ice from a local business up the road who we've had a long-standing relationship with. They employ people as well. Then you've got Dongra, Lehman, Lancel, Jurien, Two Rocks, all these small towns between Geraldton and Perth, where again we employ locally. We have depots based there with locals, we employ local tradespeople to do our work. So the economic activity, the jobs that we create, the value we put back into the community is huge. And it's easy to forget that. It's easy to go, we've got these fishermen that with their big boats and big cars and they do really well. But there's so many people that benefit from the economic activity we create there. And then there's a social aspect to it. So, not as much anymore, but in the early days, there was a huge sense of community. So the island that I grew up on, there was 30 families there. There was a school. There was a silver chain nurse. There was a local hall where you'd go down at night and play pool and do all the rest. And they still have events like the North-South footy game where all the fishermen get together from the North Islands and the South Island. They have a footy game or they have a cricket game. And that just generates such a huge buzz. So there's that sort of, that positive sort of social cohesion that it brings as well. So there is that real sort of symbiotic relationship between the local community and the co-op. And for a very long time, it dropped off a bit, but, the co-op was seen as that pillar of the community, and as I've said, everyone's either had a job there or knows someone who has had a job there. And it's one couldn't exist without the other. The co-op couldn't exist without the community, and the community wouldn't be as strong as it is without the co-op. In terms of raw, sort of dollar value, I think there was a study put out by the Western Rock Lobster Council that said the Western Rock Lobster industry in WA creates something like 1,500 jobs and contributes about $1 billion to the economy. So it's huge. And again, we couldn't do that without the support of the community, and the community wouldn't benefit from us. And I think the important thing there is cooperatives, and particularly Geraldton Fishermen's Cooperative, we've been around for 75 years, and we've done that because we've always kept a long-term focus on what value is. So, we're not a corporate that's looking at, next quarter's returns. We're looking at, do we have a sustainable fishery? Do we have a sustainable industry? And, how can we support our members who are now, some of them, third-generation fishing families? How can we support them so that, their grandkids can go fishing in 75 years' time and we've still got a sustainable industry? And if I may just finish on this point, sustainability for us, isn't just a buzzword. We were talking about sustainability before it became fashionable. We were the first fishery in the world to get MSC certification for our fishery. And Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op led the push on that. When about 15 years ago, I think it was, we started noticing there were sustainability issues with the fishery, which was under a time-based system. You'd go out and catch as much as you could in a certain period of time. And the Geraldton Fishermen's Co-op, along with the Western Rock Lobster Council, led a push to go to a quotarised system to make sure we could have sustainability within our fishery. So, for us, that's the value that we create as well. It's not just next year's tax return. It's we're looking at 50 years down the track. So.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, I really think that a lot of businesses could take a leaf out of that understanding of just how integral a business is in contributing back to its local community, and for the community to really see that. I know it's a lot easier when you've got 75 years worth of history and the very kind of origin story of the GFC, kind of lends itself to that a little bit. But, even when you talk about the sustainability aspect, it reminds me of. I mean, I used to work for the body shop, and you know, Anita Roddick, was one of those people that led the way, led the charge around, reuse, recycle, blah, 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 blah. But actually, in her book, she makes it very, very clear that it was good business first.
Yeah.
And all of the other things, they had fantastic impact. But I think that, you talking about, sustainability and making it a sustainable industry way before it was popular or before it was mandated, and all of the, the triple ticks and all of that sort of stuff that you've got to get. And I'm not poo-pooing that. I'm just saying I think it's far more enduring when an organisation does it because it looks around and it says, you know what, we want everyone to be able to have a viable income for, like you said, 50 years. Yes, for generations. We're not about greed, and we're certainly not about looking good. We're about really being responsible business, responsible for our families, responsible for our community, etc. And in doing that, it's actually been great on all fronts, and that's the bit that really resonates with me.
Well, it comes down to integrity, I think. For me, we talked before about trust. So for your customers or your stakeholders to trust you, you have to have integrity, right? Because if it's hard to trust someone that doesn't have any integrity. It's impossible. You just can't. And so for the longest time, the co-op, we weren't out there, promoting ourselves and saying, look at us, look at us. We were really keenly focused on what we needed to do to create value for our members, make sure that we could stand in front of them with integrity and say, we're doing this because we believe this is the best value for you and your communities and your families. If you had to ask me what was the key to success for that 75 years, I think it really has been that we've lent into that member or customer relationship so well. And every decision we've made, we've backed ourselves, we've led with integrity. Even if you look at the industry now, I mean, this is a bit of a pitch to any of our fishers that are watching, but we are leading the industry in so many ways: innovation, safety, environmentability. We do what we do, and we make sure we do it well, and we can stand with our hand on our heart and say we're doing it for the right reasons. I mean, a great example is, we're just working through the process now of our modern slavery statement. We're a bit behind the eight ball on that. And it's something that our customers have said to us, we'd really like you to have a look at. So again, we want to give them confidence that we're doing the right thing. And our first modern slavery statement, we're not going out and promising the world. We're basically saying, hey, we're very new to this. We don't really know, sort of what, how far we need to go. So the first goal in our statement is just to say, we're going to train everyone in the organisation to understand what this means. Because if we went out and tried to say, we're doing fantastic, we're doing this, we're doing that, but we're not actually doing it, you can't stand behind that, right? And our customers have responded really well. We've said, look, guys, we're at the start of a journey. The next 12 months, all we're going to do is learn, and then we'll tell you what we're going to do to improve our, practice in this area. And they love it because we're being honest and we can stand there with integrity,
Absolutely. It's yeah, I mean, you can't beat the truth, I say.
Yeah.
Just to wrap things up, we talk about that conference, and it was all about purpose, linking personal purpose to the organisations. And again, I talk about how important that is to my methodology. What's the plan now for the GFC to bring that purpose to life a little bit more? I mean, you've talked about the sustainability aspect, but post-conference, what does that look like? And what things will tell you that there is greater alignment between personal and company purpose?
Really good question. So we haven't got our members engaged in the conversation as much yet. And for us, we've got the staff all talking about it or thinking about it. They've made their personal commitments, which Belinda sent through, and that was fantastic. There was a few good ones in there, which I'm not sure if she shared them with you, but I'm sure she'll come back to you with we've rationalised a few of them. But for us, the next step is, okay, we've got our staff now aligned with what our purpose is. And now we need to go back to our members and say, hey, we as a team internally have gone away and we've talked about this and we've thought about this and we've made some commitments. And now we really want to go back to our members and bring them along for the journey as well. I think really important because, our fishers are interacting with our staff every day. And so, my team in the supply chain, I've already told them, hey, look, get ready because I'm getting Ingrid back and we're doing a session to go through customer service. You're dealing with our number one customers every day on the beach. And so, I think that's the next logical step for us is, get the members on board for the journey, understand that customer value relationship we want to build, and get them linked into purpose. Because something that's really interesting within our industry, it's sort of, I might be a bit nostalgic, but it's a bit sad, like the industry's shrunk. And so whereas, the island that I grew up on, which you can see in the picture behind me, there used to be, 30 families, 30 boats, a whole school, school class of kids out there. As time's gone on, and due to changes in the industry and technology, the number of boats has shrunk. They're bigger boats now with, they're able to catch more. But what that's meant is that island used to have 30 boats on it. It's now got 6. And instead of having, a whole family, going to a school there, the fisher and his decky goes over and that's it. And so that sense of community on the island's lost, has been lost somewhat. But what it's also meant from our end is, you've got these fishers that went out when the industry first started, and I'll use one of our directors, Chris. His grandfather was one of our founding directors, and he was an immigrant who couldn't speak English, who jumped ship in Fremantle and came up here and got a boat and went fishing, and didn't have $2 to rub together, and ended up being one of our founding directors. So his son fished. And then he passed on the boat to him, and which is Chris's father, and then Chris's father passed the boat on to him. So he's a third generation fisher, but that's quite rare. What tends to happen. I've got another really close friend where her grandfather actually delivered the first catch to the GFC facility when it first opened, and her father still fishes. He's about 70 years old, still out there fishing on the boat, but. My friend, she's a registered nurse, not interested in fishing. Her brother lives in Melbourne, not interested in fishing. And so what happens is it tends to get to the second or third generation, and there's a drop-off rate where the family doesn't keep fishing. And so that connection and that community has been diffused a fair bit because people leave the industry or they sell out of the industry. And so I think, for me personally, my plan as part of the, supply chain and dealing with fishers every day, those young guys that are still around and still involved, I want to bring them back into that sense of community and hold on to them as tight as I can and say, you don't realise how wonderful this co-op is and what you've got here, and so let's all get around it, let's all protect it, and hopefully try to convince a few of them to stay in the industry and stay part of the co-op. That's value
Absolutely.
for me. If we can do that, if we can keep them engaged, I think that's.
That's an extraordinary statement that you just made too. I just want to grab them and hold them and tell them. I just think that says so much about the culture that's still present at GFC, and I think the fact that you're aware of. You use the word the fact that it can be diffused, with the second and third generations, etc., and the shrinking of the number of boats. But I think there's an awareness there that you don't. As that happens and as that becomes a reality, you're going to double down on what is the thread that runs through, which is that personal purpose and the connection to that, and then just reminding people of the beating heart that is the GFC. And with leaders like you on board, it is an excellent stewardship.
Thank you. That's very kind to say. I mean, I think you talk about personal connection and personal value, and I think I probably get a bit sentimental about it because I came from that fishing family, and we got out before it became the really lucrative export market that it was. But I still remember what it was like standing on the end of the jetty, waiting for Dad to come in and seeing all the other kids on the island there. Like you've got that sentimental connection to it, and I think you talk about personal value and personal connection to purpose. I mean that's why for me it almost feels like a personal mission to say no, we got to keep this. There's the heart and soul of the co-op strong. We've got to keep them connected. But yeah, look, we'll see how we go with that. It's yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to the next time that we work together, Michael. It will be a privilege for me, and I've really appreciated your time today. It's been on my mind since back in June when we first met
Yeah,
to
look,
have
I
you here and
apologise.
have
I
this
was real
conversation.
difficult to. Yeah, so I appreciate your patience with me there. I was. I
It
mean,
was
look,
worth the wait.
that first session that we did with Tech or Vistage, Belinda and I walked away from that just straight away, going, "Yep, that's what we need. We need that message to our team to get them to sort of understand where we're heading." So look, yeah, we'll definitely see you again soon. We might even be able to get you back to the islands. Hopefully, that'll be fantastic.
Wouldn't that be
Yeah, a
wonderful? I'd
couple of
love
lobster
that.
sandwiches for lunch.
Yes. Oh, something to look forward to. Thanks again,
Definitely.
Michael.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, you've been listening to The Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard. And to find out how the Sales Doctor can help your organisation to transform its revenue, growth and profit, please email me at ingrid@thesalesdoctor.com.au. Visit us on our website at www.thesalesdoctor.com.au. I look forward to your company next episode. Bye for now.